the job, like right there.
The nature of their customer service.
If you don't have passion, there's
Families request. Welcome, Jeremy. Jeremy
Thank
is here from XCO's investigation firm.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your services.
Okay. Well, I'm a private investigator, licensed, and as well as a compliance agent for the Department of Criminal Justice. I do investigative and security services for corporations, for private citizens as well. And our background is generally we're all military veterans. Some are retired, some are honorably discharged, but we all have background in this type of field.
Okay.
So I created a company naturally because I have a lot of friends who are within the special operations field that are also getting out. And I felt like this is a great opportunity for us to sort of build on our military experiences, build on our understanding of security, build on our understanding of investigations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the military paid for it, so we might as well utilize the skills.
Right,
So at that point, I came with a company, a framework called Axios Investigations Firm, and that's where it all started.
So tell us a little bit about your recruitment process when you're recruiting your investigators.
Well, we have a bit of an eclectic mix of investigators, some of an analyst as well. We tend to really look at more of the approach of some of your background, of course, but then also your abilities to understand and analyze. It's very important. We do have a strict vetting process, one of which, as far as the investigative side, obviously we check your references, we check your investigating license, make sure that you're licensed. Okay. We do hire both veterans and veteran spouses. I've had veteran spouses. They are amazing investigators. In fact, I always say I would love to hire a battalion of female investigators because they are really awesome. I love them. So the reason why is because in the investigative industry, there's a bit of a misnomer that mostly it's male.
Right.
And so when you're investigating, you have a female in the mix. They're not looking for a female.
You're right.
So it's kind of nice. It's, the kind of military mindset is you've got to be very tactical, use all your environments. So in my mindset, we have a lot of female investigators as well as male in just all backgrounds, very diverse. The reason being is that, again, each individual client, each individual case may require something different, may require something unique. So we have to be prepared for all kinds of potential cases that could come across that would need this person's background, person's requirements, whatever. So that I just really try to build an eclectic group of individuals with solid backgrounds and really just the love of the job. You got to have passion in this business because it's long hours, lots of sitting and watching and analyzing. And if you don't have passion, there's no point to being in this business. I can tell you that.
Agreed. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Earlier you mentioned an analyst as well as an investigator. Can you tell us the difference between the two?
Yes. So an investigator is essentially the foot soldier, if you really put down to it. The person that is out there, they have to think on their feet. They have to be quick-witted. And in many cases, you have to be agile and move. I've had cases where myself and maybe others, we ended up in a car, then we end up in the woods, in the mud, in the rain, low crawling through various levels to get to the particular subject, and so I got like 10 inches of mud and, whatever, and then I have to hop back in the car and, whatever. But the investigator, it's not always that way, but investigators have to be very proactive and very agile and ability to really think on the job, like right there. Analysts do as well. But analysts are more data collection. They're more taking in the data, analyzing that data, cross-referencing that data, and then finding the points to help with the surveillance folks. So we have a great blend, a great team of analysts that help provide information, intelligence, as you would, for the people on the ground. And that allows such a great sort of symbiotic relationship. So you have to have someone that knows how to decipher things as an analyst, and then
Correct.
someone that knows how to take in that information and apply it in the ground. So that's why it's
Understood.
important to have two separate entities such as that.
Can you let us know what areas do you service?
Okay, so with the areas that we service, we do traditional investigative services. So is the term private investigator. So we do a lot of investigating, a lot of background checks, employment backgrounds, just depending on the type of background, workman's comp or workman's compensation, and data collection there. But mostly it's the investigative sort of is our bread and butter. The background checks as well, bread and butter. But really, what sort of helps put us at the next level is our security work and the sort of the higher echelon work that we do for dignitaries and people of that nature, and all around the world. I mean, we have a lot of worldly clients that rely on us for certain things. So so really, we have a mix. I don't want to be all things to all people. So what we try to do is I created. If you go to my website, you'll see a core 4, and it's very simple. We keep everything very specific. Intelligence, security, private investigations, and then of course the technical surveillance countermeasure. Technical surveillance countermeasure is a very common term called bug sweeping. So a lot of corporations is competitive intelligence, and they have a lot of. Sometimes they're concerned if somebody's listening into certain meetings and things of that nature, so they hire us to go and sweep what they call sweep the area to make sure there's no listening devices or cameras. And private citizens do as well, so we do both of that. So yeah.
Can you explain the difference between a traditional background search agency versus an investigation firm?
So I guess idealistically they're the same thing. They're researching. It's all about research. But what the difference between a traditional background is they generally use aggregated data. So I'll elaborate a little bit. Aggregated data websites like Truthfinder or Been Verified, what they use is a lot of public data points, and then they buy it, of course, legally. They buy it, and then they put it in an aggregated site. So you go in, you search it, and then you basically get some kind of public information. A lot of times that works okay. If you're trying to find something simple, it's okay. But let's just say, for example, in your field, you're the nanny or the child caregiver type of field. That aggregated data will not be helpful. It's only very limited in scope. So this is where the analyst comes into play. Having an analyst basically can take that and cross-reference that public data. Plus, we have access to a lot of things that public data is not there, that you're not allowed to see unless you have a licensed company to see. So we have access to a lot of things that you're not able to see via those public data websites. So when you Google or you find whatever you do, Bing or however you use it, any search data site, you're not going to be able to see. Maybe it's like I liken it to the iceberg effect. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what you see in relation to the normal background checks is the tip. For us, the tip and then everything below that you don't see, that's the difference between your regular traditional background checks versus an investigative analyst. We see not only the tip, but then we see the stuff below the water, if that makes sense.
Thank you for informing us in reference to the difference of the two.
Of course.
Reasoning being, a lot of families always ask, what is within the background search, as well as we have potential families who will also like to take on the sole responsibility of conducting the background search. And typically they always go the traditional route. So thank you for elaborating on that as well.
So I just segue into that real quick. There's nothing wrong with doing your data search. I mean, that's fine. But in my opinion, being a father myself, if you have a child, and you're putting that faith into what's on the data on the web to have somebody potentially watching your child, that would not be my course of action. I highly recommend doing the investigative side, just for the fact that it's for the well-being, for your mindset, because I'd be worried, very worried if I pulled public data and then I didn't see anything and I'm thinking, was I everything right? Did I get that right? You know? So that's my recommendation.
You touch on a few of the pros of contracting with an investigating firm. Do you have any additional pros outside the ones you mentioned prior? Well,
I think a lot of the additional pros is then you're getting that sort of that sort of that touch, the service. Many times over, when you do these types of things, they're very cold. There's no way to validate or verify the veracity of this sort of information.
Correct.
And when you have an investigative firm like myself, in our firm, you can ask those questions. For many times over, we do give a consultation, a brief one, mind you, but a consultation after the investigation has been completed, just to answer any questions. We try to summarize a lot of that in the report, but if there are additional questions, we have that. You're not getting that from other sites. Where you punch in the information, that's all you get, and you're like, okay, what if I got nothing? Then you're like, well, crap, I got nothing. So now, where do I go now? So I think having that extra service, that little touch there to allow someone to put their mind at ease more and have those questions answered, really helps distinguish between the two types of services that you spoke of.
You just mentioned about validating the credibility of the information you receive. Now, in certain cases, have you received information that is inaccurate and you identified some red flags? If so, how did you handle that particular scenario?
Okay, so with analysis, it is literally best guess. I always tell clients I never guarantee anything except the information I provide you. So the information I'm putting in that report has been verified through multiple ways, through Social Security, utility records, databases. If, in fact, let's just say something is a guess, but it's a good guess, we actually put a percentage. So, for example, we say this criminal history person is someone that has had a felony, okay? But it's the name and the utility records match it. Maybe the Social Security doesn't match it, so we assume it's 60% accurate. That way, we give them the ability to sort of make the call themselves, to raise that awareness. If it's anything generally lower than 60, 70%, we do not include that in the report. The reason being is because the points of validity are so low, and that it's really pointless to put into the report because it really won't help conclude what they're looking to find, all the information, potential felonies, whatever. But if we do see something, we put it in the summary. And then, of course, that's why it's important to have that consultation after. So that way they can say, hey, I saw there was like a 70% chance this person had a felony. Can you kind of explain that a little bit more? And then that way I can kind of go over that with them so they can make a better decision.
One question I would like to ask you pertaining to that, say for example, you mentioned that there's a particular percentage that will determine if you will maintain the information and or remove it. Now, when dealing with nannies and you're vetting nannies, do you look at, say, hypothetically, your percentage is 80%? Do you go lower for nannies? And reasoning being just for just securing the safety of the child when being placed in a home.
So when I say the percentage, I was giving a sort of example. Really, we tend to see something that if the name matches and something matches, so we do like a 3 or 4 type of cross-reference, it's going to go in the report. But we include the percentage. It could be 20%. I'm just giving an example, so I don't want to take away from the potential for other information. But what I was saying is that we tend to have that analysis in there because we have to have 3 or 4 points or 2 to 3 points of information that matches what we're looking, or the person who we're looking into. And then if it does, then we're putting it into the report. If it only has one of those things, let's just say similar name, but not the right birthday, not the right, social security number, not the right utility records or whatever, or the crop, we would exclude it because it's not the person. We can confirm that it's not. So
understood.
Being an analyst is really best guess. So what the key is that we try to confirm what we can confirm and provide the information that we can provide to ensure that the client can have enough intelligence to make this a sound decision for themselves.
So, what are your recommendations for families who are doing research for vetting a nanny?
Mm-hmm.
If they are researching which firm to go with, and the firm tells them, well, we can guarantee you that this information is correct.
Well, I can't speak on other firms. I speak on my firm. But I find that practice can be very problematic. It can cause a lot of liability issues, for one. Second is, like I said, I've always learned never overpromise and underdeliver. So I think it's best to allow the client to have the information. I'm sure the client is very intelligent, and having them to have that information so that way we can work together to create a sound decision. And that's why we provide recommendations in every background, no matter who it is. It could be dignitaries, ambassadors, regular people, average citizens. It makes no difference. We treat everybody similarly. Every investigation is important. So no matter the price tag, but the key is that our task is to provide information. So when other firms guarantee certain things, again, I don't condone that practice. I find that practice to be very problematic, and it can really hurt them, but that's their business. It's not mine. So I just choose not to. That's why I always say intelligence gathering and hard surveillance can provide more assurances. So for example, if we have, what we do is, for example, many times over, a client wants, a lot of surveillance, but we have no intelligence to back it. So I tell them, okay, let's slow down a second. Let's try to pull some intelligence, which is much more inexpensive, mind you. Pull some intelligence. Let's see what we can find first. And then we can validate that information with the surveillance so we have better intelligence, so it maximizes your money. And on top of which, it maximizes our ability to provide the data or the information that they need to verify. And that's why it's important to really consider both. So if we find information and then we're like, okay, here's what we believe, then we can back that up with surveillance to make it more of sort of a holistic approach to ensuring that the information that we did provide is correct.
What are your thoughts in reference to having the families receiving a background screening?
Well, again, going into this sort of holistic approach, I think the key is knowing your environment. The military, they teach you know your environment. So in the same principle applied to investigations, you have someone that is pristine, a wonderful, great nanny or child caregiver, however you decide to define it. And they have a great record, great references, but then their husband has DUIs, reckless driving, felony charges. And we've had even investigations where a husband had a pedophile background, felony. So I think it's important, and I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm trying to let them know is that we live in a society now that is all about, I'd say, a selfies society, right?
Yes.
So it's all about, the persona. You get on Instagram and you Twitter and you put on this persona. Literally, you've put on this sort of facade per se. And at that point, what would they not be doing when they're trying to apply for an elite nanny job? They have a facade. They have they really many times over. You would be surprised. They have a great interview, great resumes, but on social media, they're out getting drunk with their friends. And nothing wrong with drinking, but they're out getting drunk with their friends, and they're all having what we call a hoot and holler. I'm sorry, Southern boy. Hoot and holler. Kicking up their heels, but they're out there kicking their heels, and and that's the information that the client needs to know, because then that's something. Again, there's nothing wrong with having fun or drinking or doing whatever, but when it comes to the care of the children, then you have to sort of have all the information at play. And then the client can then make the decision. I think the key with this, in this analyst sort of investigative type of scenario, is really just providing as much information and facts as possible to make a sound decision. And also it's important to understand who you're dealing with, because if this caregiver is going to be driving your child, let's just say, and we go back to the husband or spouse or whatever has a terrible record, I mean, who knows? You're not there, you're at work.
Right.
And so how would you know? So I think those are key elements in the investigative analyst world. Really important to have the holistic total approach
Mhm.
in relation to sort of childcare and elite nannies, because again, data is everything.
Right.
And that's really what it's about. It's providing that data.
If a nanny requests for the family to have a background screening and the family say they don't feel comfortable with moving forward with the background screening for their for the adults in their household, what are your recommendations? Is that a red flag? Should an agency say, well, let's look at this situation again before we move forward?
Right.
Or,
Well, I think everybody's responsibility when you are bringing a stranger into your home. From the South, we're all very, everybody, sort of hangs out. We come in, we're very welcoming, Southern people. But at the same point, you don't know who in today's society. It's really sad, but you really don't know who you're dealing with.
right.
So when you have a family that is, I would say, unwilling to provide information,
Mhm.
and they're going to be bringing in a caregiver that is willing to provide that information,
Right.
that might be a red flag. I wouldn't say it was a terrible red flag. You just have to understand the concept behind why that family is refusing. Well, let's just say, for example, they could have been a dignitary, or they could have been in some kind of government position where they're not allowed to provide that information. If that is the case,
Yeah.
maybe that, especially we're talking about the DC area, right? So in the DC area, that could be a very common situation where the family can't really provide that information because of the government, the security clearances and all that. But not to say we can't provide that information, because even if they're in the government, we would still be able to pull some information. But however, I could see why that would be a concern in the DC area. But, again, not an uncommon, it's not a very common situation, but not to say that it wouldn't be warranted if you had a feeling that was something wrong. I mean, everybody's responsible for protecting themselves. I mean, that's why we have instincts. We were designed, humanity is designed to instinctually protect ourselves. So if we feel something that is wrong, that is what we've been gifted, instinct. So we need to use that instinct for the betterment of ourselves.
What are the most important key facts an individual should ask a private investigator before they decide to go with their firm?
Well, I think that it is my belief that you want to look at more about who or what the private investigative company has been doing as a whole. We're very community-based.
Yes.
We are very veteran organized based, so I make no bones about it. Homeless veterans. My emphasis is really just I do a lot of charity work for homeless veterans, and with companies like Alford Outreach and things of that nature. So we do a lot of that. So some companies choose not to do that. That's their choice. That's why the beauty of owning your own company.
Absolutely.
You get to choose how you want to do it.
Yes.
So, I always love giving back and charity and service. And that's the reason why I feel like one of the things that you really want to look at is the company as a whole, their performance rating. Google ratings are nice. Google ratings I think if you solely look at what Google's rating is, then I think that's an important part, or any other rating, that's an important part. But I think if you look at the Google rating, you need to read what is being written. If you're going to do that. So, for example, read if it's a very generic one, or it's something that someone really took time out to write. Even the response, you get a feel for the response. Those are things you want to look at. You want to look at, like I said, their background, what they do, as far as charitable work, if they do any, or the community based, what their website looks like. If it looks sloppy, you know what I mean, then that potentially that might be the same work they provide you. A lot of people talk about the Better Business Bureau. I don't knock the Better Business Bureau.
Right.
Sometimes, again, you have to take a whole approach.
Right.
Just as we do in investigating a person, we take a holistic approach. Same approach needs to be taken into sort of watching and looking at that particular company, and do your research on them. A lot of times people just pick up the phone to Google private investigator. They it's like a roller. They go with this guy. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think that's the correct approach, but we've been blessed. We have good ratings, and I think that the key with us is that we try to follow our name, which is Axios, which is it's about actually the name Axios means we are worthy. But yeah, again, just looking at the company, looking at who they are, what they've done, sort of do that research. I think that's important.
I agree with you 100%. And here's why. You have a lot of parents, just in general, when they're trying to identify a nanny agency that has quality placements, the first place they go is Google or Yelp.
That's right.
And so they don't look at the whole picture
That's right.
when they're reading the reviews. And I'll give you an example. They don't call the agency themselves to question about certain reviews.
That's
How
right.
was it handled?
That's right.
And to also ask questions pertaining to their situation.
That's right.
And they don't individualize their situations to ensure that that particular agency
That's
can
right.
meet their needs. Now, not saying to discredit reviews, because
No.
I'll say roughly 70 to 80% of the time, the reviews are accurate. However, I believe that an individual still should reach out to that agency after doing their thorough research and believing that they can meet their needs to get a better understanding. Can we have a mutual relationship with one another as well? So
I think that's a great point, and I want to segue into that real quick. As far as dealing with the company, I always feel that you're never going to have a perfect situation, never,
Absolutely.
and you
Right.
you try to obtain perfection is a misnomer. But if you try to provide the amount of service to the level of perfection that is essentially the best you can do, the best you can provide, at that point, I think that's all you can be asked to do.
Right.
And so if sometimes you're never going to have a happy client, but then you're right. I think it's important to find out how they handle that situation.
Yes.
When you're in the service industry, you're serving. Okay. So for example, how many times you've been to a restaurant that's had, okay food, right? Okay food. And then you keep going back, right? Because the service is amazing. You know what I mean? Like Chick-fil-A is a great example. Chick-fil-A is a very expensive sandwich, right?
Yes.
Everybody loves Chick-fil-A,
Yes.
right? Expensive sandwich. You go to McDonald's, get $1.99, or go to Chick-fil-A and pay, $5.
Right.
Right? And why do you go there? It's because of the service. Exactly. The service, right? So at that point, you really need to look, and this is again, beat up on your point, but really you need to look as a whole. What is the company as a whole? What value are they providing me? What service are they providing? And are they trying to do it in a way that is respectable?
Right.
And how do they handle the problems? Do they treat them with respect and dignity? Do they answer those problems? So say, for example, you failed a client, but do they work hard to try to resolve the issue even after they fail? Those are things that's really important as a company to really understand. So in the nanny caregiving world, my recommendation is that, just as you mentioned, that is really, you can't look at just the one failing. You got to look at, if they failed, how did they resolve that failing? And did they try to come to an amenable solution that could help provide a good service for everybody? So that's my point there.
You touched on working with high-profile clients as well. And when dealing with high-profile clients, what does a background search look like versus a traditional client process background search?
Well, we tend to treat every client the same. So from Prince to Pauper, it's really the term. But we try to treat every client as an elite client. I think it's important because it's one, it's again, we're providing a service.
Right.
Two, the elite client's issue could be just the same issue as somebody that is an average person on the street. Everybody has the same concerns. Everybody has the same problems. Just because your financial status might be greater than the other person, doesn't mean your problems are any more greater than their problems. I mean, I really try to teach especially when I bring on my staff and I bring on my team members and analysts, I really try to create an environment where it doesn't matter who it is. We treat everybody with the same equal status, the same fervor and and working to the same common goal is essentially, treating them with dignity and respect, and also making sure we get their answers. I think that it's important that every client, because again, it's their money,
Right.
and they're trusting me and my company to provide them an answer. By trusting me, that means that I'm doing something right, and so by doing so, I don't care what your status is. So
Absolutely.
for me, it's important that every client is treated the same way.
Awesome. Thank you. Wonderfully said, stated, and based off your delivery, I totally agree with you.
Well, thank you.
What are some major background services that you will request for your nanny to have if you were to be vetting a nanny for your family?
Well, if I had a caregiver or nanny for my family, I would request pretty much what a normal background would be, plus the fact that it's, again, the holistic approach. I would make sure that their family members, their husband, spouse, whatever, whoever their girlfriend, boyfriend, makes no difference. Whoever they're in contact with, I would need to know about.
Okay.
Is very important because, again, that, as I mentioned to the previous question, the influence, the ability for that child to see. We control what, many times parents control what the kids see on TV.
Right.
Okay, because there's a lot of junk out there. That's problematic, right? And we want control of that. We put password protections. We do everything we can. Phone protections. We monitor the phone. We got GPS on their backs.
Yes.
But we're not going to look at the person that's going to be dealing with our kid every day. So you have to take into consideration is like, again, who that person is going to be influencing the child. They need to be on the same page as you. And each page is different. Each book is different, right? Every chapter of a book is different, right? So one parent client might like a particular way of things. The other client might like a different thing as well. So it's important to cater the caregiver to the needs of the client. But at the same point, you need to understand what influences are going to happen when you're not there.
Right.
Right? So again, knowing that caregiver's background, I would know that I would go through the parents, I would go through their family, I would do everything possible to make sure I know who's influencing my child. Because to me, again, as a client, maybe a caregiver service, that would be of value to me.
Absolutely.
So, especially if I'm not there, that would be a problem because I'd be worried.
Right.
And then I can't focus on my job
Right.
and help other people. So I'm worried about what the caregiver is doing with my kids is not going to allow me to do my job effectively. So that's something that, again, I would consider as a background or someone that's looking to do that. That would be the key component for me.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Reason it being, when you invite a caregiver and or nanny into your home, that individual essentially becomes the third parent.
That's right.
They are your eyes. They are mom and dad when mom and dad are away from home. So I agree with you 100%.
And I also like to segue. I would also look and see how they deal with difficult situations.
Yeah.
So we're talking about kids, okay? So I spent a third of my childhood with a broken bone, probably some laceration of some sort. I think I had a VIP spot at the hospital. I was one of those, kids that, built the ramp, with the bicycle.
Clearly.
Yeah. I was one of those kids, the ones that have memes about now on Facebook. That was me. I was literally the daredevil kid. And my parents would be like, oh God, what did you break today?
Right.
So, I think the key, I feel bad for my parents, but yeah. Now, my dad said half the gray hair on his head is because of me. But here, no, there. But the key is that, how do they react in situations such as that? Do they know how to handle that? Are they calm? Do they react or are they proactive? That's a difference. I would really be something, again, to segue, that would be something also very important to me. If my child is hurt, how do you behave? What do you do? Do you know how to do that? That's very important as well.
As an investigator, how do you actually analyze that? Do you pose questions? What are your recommendations?
I would pose questions. I would be direct. I think we live in such a society where we try to be too politically correct. I think we shouldn't be scared about being direct when it comes to our kids, with respect. But I think the key to that is, you just really need to know who you're dealing with, a third parent, as you mentioned. That's a great point. You got a third parent. So, I mean, we go through so much when we're dating our wives and our spouses or whatever. We're trying to figure out who they are and get a feel for them, right? So now we have a third parent, right? So why don't we do the same thing? We got to figure out who they are, what their dreams, what they do, how they react. I mean, it's a great point. It's the third parent. So you definitely want to know what's happening in your house.
And just where you mentioned, I love the keyword being direct as well as respect.
That's right.
I'm a firm believer that you can say anything, but it's your choice of words and
That's
your
right.
delivery that will determine
That's
the path of the conversation.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I try to do that with my clients too, and I think
Yes.
it's important with respect and directness, and being, again, just for the sheer fact of information. You can't be politically correct when you're trying to grab information. It's just not going to happen.
Yes. If you have a family and they've identified the nanny that they desire to hire, what do you recommend if you have the personality test, you have the background screening, and you also mentioned situational procedures can also identify how they'll be able to handle behavior?
That's right.
What are your recommendations? Because one of the things typical nanny agencies offer is a play date before you actually hire your nanny.
Right.
So what are your recommendations for families?
So again, going back into the 4 points as I mentioned, I mean, look, in the military, they would provide you with as much intelligence as possible. They've spent a lot of time, they deciphered, they took all the information they could, and they gave it to the guys on the ground, right? The implementation, here's what they propose as the implementation. However, there's a lot of things that aren't being, really can be taken out of that the analysis that can be seen while they're on the ground. You have to allow that person to be making that decision on the ground too, that ability to do so. So when you're dealing with, let's just say, the play date, okay? You've got all the other components that I mentioned. The play date, again, they're going to be play dating, and they're going to have their best shoes on, the best, everything's ready, everything's correct. So then you're taking all those 5 factors to include the play date now. Then you have to trust yourself. I think the thing is that you've got your data, you've done your analysis, you've done the holistic surveillance approach, and then you've had your play date, and then you've had your consultation, and then you just got to decide.
Right.
I mean, I think it's a game in the military we play a lot. It's called spades. We love spades in the military. One of the best advices I got from one of my spades partner was, he used to tell me, you think long, you think wrong. You think long, you think wrong. And I to this day I laugh about it, but he used to tell me that all the time. We were playing in the field or downrange or whatever. You think long, you think wrong. So I think at that point is you get all the data, you get all the 5 points, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, is this person the best? And again, going back to the original discussion of instinct, you have to also use your instinct. What does your instinct tell you? That's why we were blessed with those instincts. We're built as humans to have instincts. So therefore, we have to trust that instinct. So if you've got all the information, you've got all the data points, you've had the play date, you thought about it, and then your instincts are saying, good to go, you got to trust your own judgment. I mean, that's really the best answer to that question.
You say think long, you think wrong.
That's right.
I say you play to win.
Play to win. Play to win. There you go, play to win. That's right. Getting that 13, baby. Getting that 13.
Thank you, Jeremy. I really do appreciate your professional insight to not only myself as well as the families. Thank you very much.